Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast for July 11th, 2024. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Mark, great to see you. And wow, we are already into the throes of summer. It's now past the 4th of July. We are certainly past Canada Day. Bastille Day is coming up in a few days in France. And I think people have really started to enjoy themselves over the course of the fair months of the year.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's midwinter down here in the southern hemisphere, but it's certainly, I always compare it to Scotland, actually, saying that winter down here is a bit like summer in Scotland. So
Yeah.
it's not too bad. You can see on the camera that the sun is shining.
Yeah, I will tell you though, in all fairness, I remember a few years ago coming down and visiting you in Sao Paulo, and I would agree, it was like Glasgow maybe in October, November. Then when we went up to the mountains, when you had a residence up there, I remember thinking to myself, wow, it's getting quite warm for winter. And I remember by the time we got up there, I was like short sleeve t-shirts. So if that's winter in Brazil, I can take it.
Yeah. The most you need is a hoodie anyway.
Mm. Exactly,
So
exactly.
So why don't you introduce our friend Leigh Hopwood, who
You
is the
bet.
subject of the interview this week?
You bet. We had a great interview, Mark, and it was on the back of an event that I attended that Leigh's organization, the Call Center Management Association, of which Leigh is the CEO, was hosting in Manchester back, I'd say early mid-May. Now, it was the Contact Center Outsourcing Summit, and I'd done a virtual presentation for this event last year, and I thought, given the mind share that was going to be in the room of buyers, it was an exclusive buyers event who wanted to learn more about the BPO business model. I thought it'd be worthwhile to travel to the UK. I never need an excuse to go visit friends who are over in the United Kingdom anyway, so I made the trip to Manchester, and I'm so glad I did. The event itself that Leigh and her team hosted was probably one of the most fascinating ones I've had the chance to participate in. Mark, you know, much like me, generally speaking, when we go and we do a talk, it's generally going to be to BPO people. It's going to be to people from the outsourced contact center side. Well, this was exclusively buyers of those services, and I got a whole new perspective on what the buyers are thinking. You get to hear firsthand what buyers are prioritizing when looking for a BPO partner. And the subject of the interview with Leigh this week was really about this dynamic, how the event came about, what the objectives of the event were, what Leigh saw as the key takeaways from the event, and a little bit about the CCMA itself as an organization. So I think it's probably going to be one of the more provocative discussions that we've had on the CX Files for some time. And certainly as a backgrounder to the event, an event that I would highly recommend buyers participate in if they happen to be around wherever Leigh is hosting it next year. Definitely one not to miss.
That's excellent. Well, I think it's something that we often forget because we do largely talk to the BPO community. And the reality is that around three-quarters of companies manage their own customer service. So they're not
Yeah.
outsourcing to a partner. So if you go and talk to the buyers of BPO services, you're also talking to the people that have got captives as well. So you can get a much wider spread of different types of company. I think that's really interesting to see, not only how are they managing it internally, but how are the ones that are outsourcing finding a partner in the first place.
You know, I think you're spot on, and I think that we become as analysts, maybe who focus on the services side of CX, we become a bit myopic. And as you say, a huge proportion of CX is still managed in-house, is still managed by captives. So being able to balance out what we might be hearing from our friends in the outsourcing community alongside with what the buying side of the equation is saying really I think it counts and it makes us better people in terms of our roles as analysts and advisors. So my recommendation is that we don't spare a second and we go to listen to what Leigh had to say in her interview that I conducted with her following the event that she held in Manchester. I'm really excited for this week's edition of the CX Files to welcome a longtime friend of mine, Leigh Hopwood, who is the CEO of the CCMA. She's joining us from her office in London. Leigh, great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. And we were joking around a little bit before I hit the record button. I want to stress that I mentioned my longtime friend, not my old friend, my longtime friend. As we were just joking about what it's like as we each put the years on, but I think I'm probably ahead of you in that department, Leigh. So don't worry, you will catch up eventually.
Only just. You're not that far ahead of me.
You're too kind. That's one of the reasons I consider you such a wonderful friend, both personally and professionally. Leigh, I had the chance to catch up with you and your absolutely wonderful team a few weeks ago in the UK when I was over speaking at one of your events. And that was the impetus for bringing you on to the podcast today to chat a little bit about what the event entailed. But before we do so, before we get into that, I was wondering if you could explain to our audience who's listening, not just from the UK, but really from around the world, if you could explain to us a little bit about what the CCMA is. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the structure and its mandate, and what role does it play within the UK customer experience space?
Yeah, and well, first of all, thank you for joining us the other week. It was such a good event, and it was such a special time to be able to for our members to listen to you with all of the experience you have and that you bring to the table. So thank you for joining us for that. But the CCMA, we are 30 years old this year, which is incredible. And our whole purpose, our whole reason for being is to help contact centres in the UK, to help their leadership teams to be as successful as they can be. In essence, to demonstrate the strategic value of the contact centre. I have a really, really firm belief that the contact centre has so much insight, so much experience. The way it manages its teams, the way it works can deliver so much value to the rest of the business. Information about customers, customer behavior, what they like, what they don't like, what's working, what isn't working, and being able to demonstrate that to the rest of the business. So here at the CCMA, we're all about that. We're all about supporting contact center leaders to find excellence, and we do that through sharing best practice. We do our awards, which have happened recently, to really pull out those really great stories that we then share through conferences and events. We do research, insights, just loads of different ways to really support the UK industry.
And you're doing a great job of that. I have been familiar with the CCMA for quite some time, and been involved with, in a peripheral manner, of course, as much as I can be from Canada, in terms of a number of your events that I've had the pleasure of attending. And we talk a little bit about the organization being about 30 years old, which in itself is just a great accomplishment. I cut my teeth in the CX industry when I first got into it in the United Kingdom, and that was about 20 years ago. I would advocate that probably as an industry, CX has probably existed for about 30 to 35 years. So really, you have been at the vanguard of the industry or the sector as it really became a thing, shall we say, in terms of the CCMA and the association that it's had with how customer experience is being managed, how it's being done, how it's really being perceived in the British context.
We have, and it's interesting hearing you use the term CX. And I'm a marketer by trade, and I've spent a long time looking at marketing and the whole piece around marketing, of which I feel customer experience sits quite comfortably in that space. Where for us the CCMA is really focused is on contact centres, which includes customer experience. But customer experience is also through the product that you use. It's through your retail outlet. It's through your website. It's through when you're paying a bill. So there's for me, the term CX is only part of what we do in the contact center, because we also support sales functions. We also support help desk functions. So it's quite an interesting, that in itself, I think, is a really interesting conversation around CX and contact centers and customer service. You know, we see that one thrown in as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And let's dive into that contact center element, because one of the reasons I thought it would be fun to chat today would be to discuss a little bit about what took place in Manchester a few weeks ago. Now, I'll be honest with you, Leigh, it was probably the first time as an analyst who covers BPO and outsourced contact center work that I've had the chance to address a group of people from the buy side that large. And the dynamic and the difference between speaking to buyers versus a room full of outsourcers, which I'd done the previous week at CX Outsourcers in Atlanta, like night and day. Very, very different dynamic, very different elements to it. So before we get into what some of those elements and dynamics are, could you talk a little bit about what the event was that took place in Manchester, and what the objective of that gathering was really set up to be?
So for the last few years, I've been looking at how we can better to support the outsourcing side of UK contact centres. How can we help them better understand what the buyer is looking for, what the in-house contact centre folk are looking for, but also support them so that they don't have to drop their price? Why does that whole outsourcing procurement piece seem to always end up being about price? So I have a view that outsourcers can deliver a huge amount of value, and that maybe not everyone really realizes and appreciates just how much value they can deliver. So I could have gone away and got all the outsourcers together and got them around a table and said, right, let's stop driving everybody's prices down. Let's look at value. And I thought, you know what, that's just not going to work. So where I ended up was going back to the buying side, going back to the in-house folk, and looking at how we can better support them by opening their eyes to what's possible through outsourcing. So the pretext, if you like, for that event was to bring buyers together, no outsourcers in the room at all. So that in itself is quite unique. No outsourcers in the room at all, so that the buyer had a safe space to be able to learn from each other around how they use outsourcers, where those outsourcers are. I'm not putting my head in the sand. We know that outsourcing isn't just in the UK. We know that UK business does go offshore, but where is the value? Where are the lessons that can be learned? How can we build, frankly, better, more productive, more profitable for outsourcing relationships? That was what the pretext was. And that's why we had so many people in the room that were responsible for their outsourcing partnerships, their outsourcing relationships. And the feedback we had was that it was one of the first times that those people were in that comfortable place to be able to talk about what was working and what isn't working, and where they can do things better, differently, in order to basically improve the customer experience.
That is very similar to the feeling I got, that people were anxious to find out, who attended the gathering. They were anxious to try and find out about what they could do, how they could engage, what some of the models would be. As you mentioned, outsourcing is not just in the UK, it's in a lot of different places. And I definitely found that there was an appetite for individuals to educate themselves about how they could avail themselves of third-party services. And I was really impressed with the breadth of verticals that were attending as well. You know, I met people who were in from the event management business, individuals from airlines. I believe there's a couple of people who were in from healthcare and public sector. So certainly kudos to you and to the team for bringing in a very diverse section of the contact center community. That was important. And I'd be curious, Leigh, if you could talk a little bit about what you saw as what some of the key outcomes and takeaways that emerged from the gathering were, because there were a number of very compelling speakers. Well, I mean, everybody was very compelling, but I thought that there were a lot of opinions that were shared. But I always like to see from individuals that are organizing events, when you boil it down, what were maybe the 2 to 3 themes that really stood out for you, that were on the minds of the delegates that participated?
Mm. So we approached the conversation. So as you know, there were a number of case studies shared where we had one that talked about how they went from large contact center in the UK and they outsourced now most of what they do through a global network of outsourcers. And we heard how they had done that and why they had done that. And we had another case study where it was an organization based in one region of the UK that stayed local, stayed very, very local. So there was a lot of different types of scenarios shared, but the content in the main focused around two places. One was around the procurement process, and one was around, I've now got an outsourcer, how do I make this relationship work better? What was interesting around the procurement side of things, almost to a surprise, I think, to all of us in the room, was that the number one priority when you're looking for an outsourcer was the cultural fit. And I think that was really, really interesting. And it does come back to that people buy from people. And if there is that cultural fit, then actually the rest of the partnership flows nicely because you're open, you're transparent, you know how each other works, you share stuff, and you're able to extract value both ways. So that was interesting. The other piece from the buying side of things was price was in there. Again, not going to put heads in sands. Price was in there, but it was recognized around the room that buyers are looking for that additional value. They are looking for flexibility. They are looking for the agility. But it's hard when that then goes to procurement, and it's procurement that then drives the price. So there's quite a process we've got to go through on that procurement side for price not to be such an important factor. On the other side, right, I've got an outsourcer, it's working brilliantly. The key messages that came out there were around quality, and there's still a feeling that outsourcers do need to really focus on building the confidence with the buyer that they can deliver quality. So we know that quality is possible. We know it is because the outsourcers have access to so much insight and information for what they're doing that they absolutely can deliver quality. So that was one of the key areas. And I'm just trying to think what were the other. The other key message that came out, I forgot for a moment there, but the other key message that came out was proactivity. So once you are in that relationship, being able for the outsourcer to proactively work with the client around, we can provide this service, we can help you with this transformation. Part of that does come down to that setup initially and having the right culture in place, but being able to drive more value by having that proactive management from the outsourcer. There were loads of things that came out of it, but they were the key messages that I think really hammered home.
I would agree with you on all counts. And it was interesting. The one that really stuck out for me, and this is was my light bulb moment of the event, was the extent to which culture was so much of a driver, aligning the enterprise's contact center culture with what the outsourcer can bring to the table. And you might recall, Leigh, that the following week I wrote a blog about this very topic and credited the event that the CCMA put on as the catalyst for me wanting to put this out into the internet. And that became the most read blog of the year that I've published. And it's interesting because this was not something that I'd been picking up on talking to my friends in the BPO community. In the BPO community, it's all value add services. It's price point. It's how competitive are you? It's what your offshore or nearshore footprint looks like. But when you're talking to the buyers and they bring culture up, I'm almost wondering, is this a missing link that somehow is not being picked up by many individuals in the BPO community that could very well be a game changer in terms of winning more business?
Oh, absolutely. And it just goes to show what happens if you put potential customers in a room and give them the safe space to talk. because I do wonder whether culture had ever. It's not the kind of thing that I suspect comes into why did we not win this business? Oh, because we didn't have a cultural fit. That's unlikely to be an answer. In a similar respect, if you think about any other services that any other functions buy, that cultural fit is important. It's that gut feel.
Yeah.
Can we work with these people? And it's not therefore uncommon to see that actually a client buys into the people that they are working with. When those people move on, it's really important for the outsourcer to make sure that they've got similar culture-led people replacing those that move on in order to retain the business. Because if that cultural fit isn't there because people are buying for people, then that's where the danger is.
Bang on. I couldn't agree more. So, Leigh, moving on into the rest of 2024, as we move into the second half, and I can't believe we're actually at the point where H2 is about to start. It's depressing. That's one of the things as we go back to our discussion about getting older, the years go by a heck of a lot faster. Do you remember when you were young and how long it took to go from one birthday to the next one? Now it's like you're blinking your eyes. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about what's coming up for the CCMA. What are some of the flagship or more tailored targeted events that our listeners might be wanting to consider if they're in the UK, or maybe if they're traveling into the UK from abroad and they might want to avail themselves of?
Good question. Well, we've always got so much going on. So this side of Christmas, one of the big things that your listeners might be interested in is that we run and support the European Contact Center and Customer Service Awards. They're open right now. Sorry, am I allowed to do a quick little plug? Nominations close on the 19th of July. There you go, I did it. But the awards evening themselves is on the 26th of November, and that is a brilliant celebration of European customer contact. So certainly something that your listeners might be interested in. But here in the UK, another major event that we're doing is on the 2nd of October. It's a conference where we're going to be showcasing winners from the UK National Contact Centre Awards. We've got a keynote speaker who I can't reveal yet at the end of the day, well-known home brand in the UK. And we've also got a technology summit. We have got more research coming out, in particular around the adoption of AI in contact centres. We've got online seminars coming up throughout the autumn. And a couple of other things that we do that maybe some of your listeners would be interested in. We support contact centres. I said right at the top of the conversation that we're here to help contact centres improve their customer and employee experience, improve their operational performance in order to deliver that strategic value. And there's two, as well as all this content and all of these opportunities to get together and talk to each other and learn from each other, we also have the Contact Centre Standards Framework that gives contact centres the ability to have a look at all of the pieces of their puzzle, whether they've got all those pieces in the puzzle and what's missing to help them get better at what they do. And along the way, if you like, the next step in that is that we have the Academy. The Academy is going from strength to strength. We've got loads of training courses delivered in all sorts of different ways. So there's loads to do there. But fundamentally, come and join us. Come and get involved. Come and engage with us. Come and learn from us. Come and teach us. There's loads that we talk about, from employee engagement to customer experience and absolutely everything in between.
Well, I can vouch for the European Contact Center Awards. That is an event that is a no miss for me. It is truly, I would say, the Academy Awards of the contact center industry. Always a great time, and quite frankly, just one of the best networking events that you can, I think, attend. I've been coming the last few years, and I certainly plan on being there in 2024. The rest of the activities that you've got coming up, Leigh, are just amazing. And I would strongly urge the listeners of the CX Files to take a look at the website to keep abreast about what's happening, what they might want to take part in, because it's always a great opportunity to meet some fantastic people, but as you say, to learn something. So on that note.
And no, do you know what? I was just going to add that looking into 2025, on the bounce of the event that we did the other week, there were lots of learnings. We've talked about some of them now, so, real open-eyed moments. And we are looking at what we can do to further support the outsourcing sector, both outsourcers and buyers in 2025. So it is a little bit of a watch this space too.
I love watch the space. That's like stay tuned or watch the space. These are my favorite slogans. It gives us something to anticipate, which I think is very important. It demonstrates organizations that are dynamic and have things going on. So Leigh, thank you very much. It's always great to catch up with you. I am certain that there's only great things ahead for the CCMA, and we look forward to catching up with you live in the UK soon, I hope.
Thank you so much. I look forward to welcoming you back to London.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.